I'm Bill Kassel, and this is Free Expression. This program is all about conveying the Christian message from a Catholic point of view and defending the liberty which makes it possible to do that. We examine how miracles defy scientific explanation, and we consider ways of teaching children about sin to help them develop a well-formed conscience. Join us, sit back, and enjoy some free expression. Do you believe in miracles? In our science-oriented culture, skepticism reigns about phenomena that can't be explained in terms of empirical knowledge. Yet Christian faith is based on events that recognized physical principles can't account for. Father Robert Spitzer has taken on the task of trying to reconcile the otherworldly with accepted scientific precepts. He's president of the Magis Center of Faith and Reason. He's written a new book called Christ, Science, and Reason, What We Can Know About Jesus, Mary, and Miracles, and he's here now. Father, thanks very much for being with us.
It's great to be with you, Bill.
If there's one aspect of religion that's a continual stumbling block for modern-minded folk, it's the miraculous. You're attempting to bridge a pretty formidable gap here.
Yeah. Well, I think I can do it through using the method of science to get to a more certain conclusion that what a particular phenomena is not scientifically and naturalistically explicable. And the more we can demonstrate that, the more believable and probative, the more certain we can be that there is another intervening power, another divine power that is causing it. Now, of course, you can't be absolutely certain that there is no naturalistic explanation. Maybe we don't know all the laws of nature, et cetera, et cetera. All these things are posed as alternative perspectives, right? When you're looking at the question, they say, well, how can you be so sure you know everything about nature? I just say, well, no, I'm not sure that I have isolated everything, that I know every single physical law. But what I can say is we do know a lot of physical laws, and we can describe the vast majority of phenomena that we see. And if we can't describe it, then we do discover some new laws of physics, etc. But at the same time, with all the laws we do have that describe so much of what naturalistic phenomena is, when we see a phenomenon that defies those laws on about 4 or 5 different levels, it's probably because there's some other explanation that's non-naturalistic. After a while, when you have a phenomenon that's literally opposed to the laws of nature, and you look at that and you just go, are you going to believe that? Or are you going to believe there's something in nature we just don't know that causes these 5 laws of nature to be defied? And my answer is, if you don't regularly see this, that these laws of nature are collectively being defied all the time, then I'm not so sure you've isolated a new natural law that we just haven't discovered yet. I think it's much more likely that this is a very rare occurrence, and that since it is linked to a religious claim or a religious person or a religious phenomena, I'm going to go, I think, very safely, responsibly, and reasonably to a divine power as the source or origin.
Well, but that is the problem, isn't it? I know that a lot of people who are skeptical about religion in general and miracles in particular will say, I believe in what I can touch, I believe in what I can taste and smell. I'm not going to step out on faith when there's absolutely no scientific evidence to support this. I mean, this is almost a sort of religious statement in itself for certain people.
No, that's absolutely true. But the interesting thing is most of the miraculous phenomena we know about, right, these are phenomena that are empirically accessible. Let's take the miracle of the sun at Fatima, which I discuss in the book, right? We have 40,000 to 50,000 witnesses of this phenomena, and it occurs the very time and date and place that the Blessed Virgin Mary revealed to Lucy it would happen 4 different times. So you look at that and you go, well, wait a minute. You've got the sun literally detaching from its place. It's spinning on its own axis. It finally detaches from where it is. It comes roaring down toward the earth, and then it returns back to its place in the sky, starts rotating on its own axis again, shooting out different rays of colors of things, and then finally becomes normal. Is that a solar phenomenon? No, it wasn't a solar phenomenon, because you can plainly see, by all the various observatories around the world, nothing special was happening to the sun, at that particular time. It was only happening in Fatima. Well, if it's not a solar phenomenon, then it has to be an atmospheric phenomenon. And people like Father Dr. Stanley Yaki, the great priest physicist there, Yaki basically said, you'd have to have a lens that's probably about a half a mile in diameter, and you'd have to have very special dimensions of this lens so that it could transmit and refract various different wavelengths and frequencies of light as this thing is turning on its own axis. But then this big, huge, I'm going to call it supernatural lens, has to come roaring in from about a half a mile above the grotto, right down, to maybe a couple of thousand feet above the grotto, and, so much so that it's refracting the sunlight so powerfully that it's drying off the clothes and the ground, and then it has to go back up into its place. So you say, well, what are the odds of this supernatural lens being present there? Well, there's no possible way of explaining that. But the point I'm trying to make to you is it's an empirical phenomenon, right? I mean, everybody saw it. 40,000 to 50,000 people, including people who are hostile to the church.
What about other kinds of things? Now, your book deals with phenomena like the Shroud of Turin, the Tilma of Guadalupe. The Guadalupe story is something that I'm aware of, and I've always been fascinated by. The Tilma has been examined very closely, and they find these minute images in it, and just all kinds of interesting things.
That's right. That was done by Dr. Jose Aste-Tonsman. He was a person, he had got a doctorate from Cornell and then basically went on to work with NASA for several years, precisely in this area of amplification of optics. He takes this technology and he starts examining the Tilma, the eyes in the Tilma of Guadalupe. And what he can see as he amplifies the corneas of Our Lady, very clearly these figures that are there in Our Lady's eyes. And you see an image in the left eye and the right eye. When you superimpose those corneas onto one another, it's very clear. These images are very clear of what the people looked like.
Right. And for the benefit of listeners who might not know this story, we're talking about the image of Mary on Juan Diego's garment.
Which is the Tilma we still have today.
Right.
And, the miraculous Tilma. Juan Diego, St. Juan Diego, he is, there. He has a Tilma with all these Castilian roses. The Blessed Virgin Mary asked Juan Diego, approach the bishop, have him build, a church, a chapel on Tepeyac Hill here, Mexico City. And, the bishop says, well, I'm not just going to do that on your word. I need a sign. So he comes back to Tepeyac Hill. He picks all the Castilian roses he sees, brings it in his Tilma, and then he plunks it down in front of the bishop. And when he drops the roses, then the image of Our Lady appears. But the main thing to remember is that when he drops the roses there, who's there? Well, there's a native there who's an Indian, and the Indian is sitting down with his legs crossed, and he's looking up at Juan Diego, with the Tilma. Then you can see right next to him Bishop Zumarraga, and then next to Bishop Zumarraga is his translator, who's kind of talking as he's watching this scene as well. Then you can see right next to the translator is actually Juan Diego himself. And now the reason you see that there is the Blessed Virgin is looking at the scene, not from where Juan Diego has got his Tilma being unfurled. She's looking at the scene from, being opposite of them. That's just part of the mystery. The actual dyes and pigments, this is so unbelievably miraculous. They've never lost their luster. They've never decomposed. They've never flecked or anything. Whereas we know that there is paint on the Guadalupe Tilma, those rays coming out of the Blessed Virgin,
Right.
the moon and the angel underneath the Blessed Virgin, those were painted in. And anything that was painted, it's all decomposing. It lost its luster hundreds of years ago, etc. Not the image of Our Lady herself. That image has never lost its luster, never flecked, never decomposed in any way whatsoever over nearly 500 years. So what we're dealing with is truly naturalistic inexplicability in terms of the material, the agave material, literally the pigments and the dyes. By the way, there's no brush strokes in this. There's no undersketching in this. There's no, sizing of the tilma or the canvas so you could paint on a flat, even surface. There's no overvarnish to protect the colors, keep the paint from literally rising in the bulky areas and the paint being destroyed, et cetera, et cetera. All these things are just one mystery, one naturally inexplicable occurrence after the next.
Two questions come to my mind, I guess. One is, why does God give us these inexplicable events? And the other question is, why don't they happen more frequently?
I think the first reason God gives it to us is because he wants us to see, hey, there's supernatural power here, alive and well, that's manifest right in our midst. God cares about us. He's interacting with the world. He's not only giving us a religious pronouncement and a religious event, he's backing it up with something that science can analyze as being naturalistically inexplicable because it's defying the laws of physics as we know them, and not only defying those laws, but many laws all at the same time. So I think God's just trying to tell us, hey, I'm here.
And yet these events are pretty rare, so people tend to say, well, why can't we see them more often? Why can't we delve more?
Well, because if they weren't rare, we begin to try and integrate them into our laws of physics.
Yes.
Which, of course, now we know, hey, they don't belong in the laws of physics. It's the rarity of them that helps us to see God's divine power that's manifest in them. I think there's a secondary reason why especially healing miracles are rare, and that is that all we had to do was just say, dear Lord, please heal me from this thing. Okay, dear Lord, I got this other thing, please heal me. And God gives you a miracle every time, right? Well, then, of course, you would basically have no struggle, nothing that would define your character going forward. God would just take care of everything like a hovering parent, and so you wouldn't have to worry about anything. So I think he does want us to have the challenges that call forth our compassionate service of one another, and I think that's why he allows us to need one another, to be vulnerable before him and to let him in, and of course to serve one another. I mean, these are the reasons that God allows challenges to happen in our lives.
The book is Christ, Science, and Reason, What We Can Know About Jesus, Mary, and Miracles by Father Robert Spitzer. Where can people find out about this and perhaps buy the book?
Yeah, you could buy it, of course, at Ignatius.com, the publisher. You could also buy it at magiscenter.com. That's my organization, magiscenter.com. You could also, of course, buy it on Amazon or any one of the big online stores, or you could buy it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Well, it sounds like a fascinating read. Thank you very, very much for taking time to tell us about it.
Thank you, Bill, for the opportunity to speak of it.
How do you teach children about sin? For that matter, how do you help adults recognize and deal with their harmful inclinations? We all face an ongoing interior battle against our weaknesses, our fundamental flaws, the enticements of a fallen world. It's the human condition. Dr. John Wood has taken the timeless teachings of the Church and presented them in a series of imaginative, engaging books geared toward young people, but probably useful to all of us. They're called the Seven Deadly Dragons. He's with us now. John, thanks for taking time to speak with us.
My pleasure, Bill. Great to be with you.
The sooner young people recognize life's moral challenges, the better, I suppose, but introducing kids to certain realities is a kind of delicate proposition. How are you approaching that?
I've spoken to a lot of adult audiences over the last decade. I had my first book, Ordinary Lives, Extraordinary Mission. The subtitle was 5 Steps to Winning the War Within. And, step one was knowing that you're in a war, that you're in a battle, that we all have choices to make. And then step two is to kind of study your enemy, study your opponent. And so I played a lot of sports, and I've used a lot of sports analogies. I've spoken to a lot of adults, but I've always tried to kind of figure out, how can we, help parents teach their kids these foundations of virtue? How can we help them understand the concept of sin and evil and temptation and struggle? And so we came up with this idea of dragon slaying. Dragons represent sins, temptations, and obstacles to becoming saints. And so I think, a lot of kids don't like to be told this is right and this is wrong, or to memorize a list of rules and regulations, but I've yet to meet a kid that didn't want to be a dragon slayer. And so it's a really neat concept. We give the dragons a name. We give them a picture. My daughter's a tremendous artist, and so we give an image to these 7 deadly dragons based on the 7 deadly sins of pride, envy, sloth, greed, wrath, gluttony, and lust. And so when kids can visualize a sin, when they can visualize the dragon, when they can get to recognize the dragon, when they can study the dragon, the temptation, the obstacle, when they know what they're up against, that's a tremendous power to understand. And then they can study the virtues, which we call weapons that can slay the dragon. And so we feel like this is a powerful tool for parents. If kids can identify their dragons, they can slay their dragons. And like you said, the earlier we can build that foundation, the better they're going to make good choices. And that's really what it's about, is choosing virtue over vice.
Yeah, what age group are we talking about here? Are you looking at elementary level kids, or what's the focus?
The books are geared towards ages 7 to 12. They're written around a 5th grade reading level, but we really encourage families to read these stories out loud together, which, has all kind of benefits. But we've heard from parents all over the country, that even my 5-year-old understands this concept. And we've also heard parents say, hey, my 23-year-old keeps listening in, and my teenagers are kind of listening into this idea, because storytelling is powerful. Everybody loves a story. You say you want to teach people the truth, tell them the truth. But if you want them to remember the truth and live the truth and love the truth, then tell them a story. And so there's lots of imagery in these books that are going to grab even the really early readers to look at the pictures. There's storytelling, and then there's also, we have included QR codes for more in-depth catechesis for some of the older kids. But the story itself is the story of young Roland, which is actually my middle name, Roland, and some of the stories are partly true stories of, him going through an academy from 2nd grade through 8th grade, and that's kind of the age of students we wanted to intrigue and to kind of get them interested and catch their attention, and they can relate to the stories because it's really about a kid in their age group. So that's kind of who we're aiming for. And we don't want to just reach the kid. We want the parents to be able to teach the kids, and that's what we tell the parents at the beginning. This is a tool to help them teach virtue to their kids.
Okay, so this is really an interactive thing for the parents and the children to do together.
That's our hope. Certainly kids can sit down, and many of them have just kind of read it cover to cover on their own. But I feel like there's a lot of advantages for parents to read the stories out loud. Kids sitting around listening to storytelling, it's a great habit for families in general. My family has always loved to read stories together, and we feel like it can open up a lot of conversations. And if the parents know the stories along with the kids, it's very useful in them, learning the dragons as well, because if my kids have all these dragons memorized and they know, all about them, all I really have to do is name the dragon. If they're being lazy, I can say, the yellow dragon of sloth is getting you. Or if they're getting greedy, it's like the green one's getting you. When you can just name the dragon and the kid knows what you're talking about, that's great. So, yeah, we do hope that families will read these together.
Well, kids react very negatively when they're told not to do things. It's difficult for them to grasp why they shouldn't do things. It really depends on the development of conscience. How do you approach that? How do you get a kid to understand conscience and why virtue is really a positive thing?
Yeah, well, I think that's where the stories are beneficial. We actually introduce these in sacramental retreats. So we do a lot of second-grade sacramental retreats for the sacraments of reconciliation and First Communion. And, as we prepare kids to make a confession, we're teaching them how to examine their conscience. We're teaching them how to name their dragons. And so along with these stories included is an examination of conscience for each particular dragon. For example, the first book, The Red Dragon of Pride, they can get to the end of that story and they can read off a list of questions of whether they're being attacked by pride. Have I done this? Have I done this? That's the genius, I think, of Catholicism is it teaches us to name our dragons, to name our sins, because that's really the first step in slaying them. And so when the stories make it practical, they can see young Roland doing something that, they themselves may have done or been tempted to do, and they can start to relate to that to their everyday, ordinary life when they're tempted. And so really it is an examination of conscience. It's just in the story format, and we give them that Dragon Slayer's examination of conscience at the end. There's a full list of all 7 deadly dragons, but each book contains the individual dragon questions as well, so they can ask those questions every day and say, have I lost to this dragon, or am I losing to this dragon? And that's where we feel like it's very useful in everyday life.
This book series is really one element in a larger comprehensive mission, which you operate under the title Extraordinary Mission. Tell us about that.
As I mentioned earlier, my first book was published through Dynamic Catholic. It was called Ordinary Lives, Extraordinary Mission, and the extraordinary mission is to become saints. That universal call to holiness, John Paul II was a great influence, be not afraid to be saints, and that we're all called to be saints in the middle of our ordinary life. And so that's where my nonprofit organization really came from. After a couple years starting getting, that first book has over 250,000 copies kind of floating around the United States because of how Dynamic Catholic kind of distributes them in mass quantities. And so that gave me lots of opportunities to speak, and I quickly realized I could do a lot of good and turn this into a nonprofit organization. And, I kind of transitioned over the last 5 years into trying to get my target audience or reach my target audience more, which is young parents. And that's where we felt like sacramental retreats, oftentimes young parents only show up when their kid is about to receive First Communion or confirmation. And if that's when they're coming, then we need to engage in them. We need to inspire them. We need to motivate them to keep them and to go home and teach the faith to their kids. And so we've kind of gone all in creating these sacramental retreats, and that's where these resources come from. We have access to about 3,000 families in our live retreats every year. I get an opportunity to speak directly to the parents and motivate them, and then we give them these resources. We don't want to just tell them to be the primary educators. We want to help them and show them and then give them the resources they need to do that. And that's what the Extraordinary Mission is all about, is raising saints and helping the next generation of saints to live a life of virtue and change the world.
What's your background? How'd you get into all this?
Well, actually, I'm an eye doctor. That's what I do for a living. I support my family strictly on doing eye exams still. I travel. I'm a mobile eye doctor. I travel to nursing homes, which is kind of a ministry in and of itself. But I really got involved and started by just volunteering at my own local parish. Someone asked us to start a ministry. We started a ministry called Fun, Faith, and Family, where once a month I'd stand up and do a talk, and my wife would work with the kids. So it would be kind of a family event, and that grew. And then I had an opportunity to meet Matthew Kelly. I was in the process of, writing down things to kind of prepare for these talks. And it turned into that first book, and then that first book launched my really speaking, writing career, which I wasn't really trying to do. I'm a pretty shy, introverted guy and never saw myself as a speaker or a writer. I'm a scientist by trade, but God has a sense of humor, and God started giving me all these opportunities. I utilize the analogy of the eyes, and in fact, the dragons are based on the visible light spectrum, that Jesus is the one true light. White light comes from those different wavelengths of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And so we wanted to utilize that in the stories, not only to help the kids remember the dragons by colors, but that the good, the true, and the beautiful is what God creates, and that the dragons, or evil, is basically trying to corrupt that into something evil, false, and ugly. And so the colors represent goodness, but you can see in the stories how that goodness can be distorted, and that really comes from my eye doctor background. So try to use my regular career to kind of implement ways to teach the faith to kids.
Your being an eye doctor actually seems kind of relevant. Your orientation is very visual. I've seen some of the graphics in these books, and they're striking. You said they were done by your daughter?
Yeah, so we had our whole family was involved, which is really what makes this project so special for me, was that the original book was a catechetical book. I have a podcast called Saturdays with Sir Roland on Catholic Sprouts, and, where we're just teaching kids this idea of dragon slaying. And I wrote a book kind of based on the podcast, and a lot of the early readers said, kids like stories. And so I tried to start writing a story, but I realized, this needs to be 7 stories. I can't really make it into one story. And so at the beginning of this year, we got the ambitious goal of writing a series of books, publishing the first one on Easter and then one book every month. And so it took a whole team. My daughter is the artist and my son. So my daughter drew all the dragons and the saints that are featured in the stories. Each story features a saint and a dragon. My son drew all the weapons and the armor. So there's the full armor of God, and there's also a weapon of virtue, a medieval weapon that represents you. And then my media guy, I have a designer, media young guy, just graduated from college, and he took those images and started really designing the books to make them really visual appealing. We'd added backgrounds to the images, and then we added more images for each chapter using the software that he has, and we kind of learned as we went. My other daughter and my wife did most of the editing for the books. Our entire family kind of had an assembly line as I was writing the stories, and then they're being edited, and then the images and all that stuff was being put together. It took a whole family effort, and so that's really what makes the project so special. This is a project for families, completed by a family.
That's wonderful. Well, where can people find out more about this? Perhaps buy the books or book you for one of your presentations?
Just go to our website, which is extraordinarymission.com. There's a link there called Dragon Slayers, or you can go to extraordinarymission.com/7deadlydragons to go specifically to the book page. But they're there. You'll find all the information about what we do and all of our products. The books are also available on Amazon and other bookstores, I'm sure. But the easiest and best price is actually on our website. They come with the sleeve and everything. So extraordinarymission.com would be the best place to go to check everything out.
Dr. John Wood, The 7 Deadly Dragons. Thanks a lot for taking time to talk about this. It's a really innovative and striking approach.
It's been my pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Be with us next time when we explore other aspects of religious communication and look deeper into the great Christian heritage of free expression. Free Expression with Bill Kassel is a production of Good Shepherd Catholic Radio and Company Publications, where good books, good music, and good radio are always good company. Dan Curris provided technical assistance. Theme and incidental music are by Dan Adam. The program was produced and directed by Bill Kassel. This is Good Shepherd Catholic Radio.